Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started now to make sure that we still only take up the allotted amount of time that we had. But this session, in case anyone is late, will be up on YouTube. This is a recorded session, so everything that you see here today, you'll be able to watch through a little bit later. So everyone, welcome, and thank you once again for your patience. My name is Richard Brown. I'm an admission counselor here in the Office of Admission. And welcome to the St. Louis University Financial Aid webinar. So I'm joined by Hannah Smith from our Office of Student Financial Services. She's going to go through a really fantastic presentation today about the award offer, what it means, what things could change, things like that. So before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few webinar logistics, right? Since this is a webinar, everyone's video, camera, and sound is off. There's no way for you all to be able to turn that on. So the intent of this webinar is to share general information about the financial aid process and what your financial aid offer will look like when you receive it, either in the past or in the next coming weeks. With that, due to the volume of the attendees, we will not be answering individualized questions in the Q&A. We definitely encourage generalized questions about the financial aid package, but if you do have specific questions about your offer, we absolutely encourage you to reach out to your admission counselor. That's what we're here for. And we're also the financial aid counselors for each of our students as well. So also, please, the use of the chat will be for links to the SLU website. So keep that in mind, keep that in sight as throughout the presentation tonight. And so you can navigate with us as we mention things. And also the Q&A function you'll be able to use throughout the entire night. And if we already know it's going to be answered live, we'll click live. And if not, then we will answer it privately for everyone else. So now I'd like to turn over to our presenter for tonight, Hannah Smith, for her presentation.
Yeah, thank you all for being here and bearing with us as we get you the correct link to join us tonight. So as Rich said, we're just going to kind of go over the financial aid offer from SLU and what that looks like, and hopefully anticipate some questions that you have on your mind at this point in the financial aid process. Hopefully you'll leave here with some questions answered, but if not, have some resources to follow up with afterwards to get those individualized questions answered that you have on your mind at this point. So tonight we're just going to go over basics. So we're going to take it back to the very beginning of the process, do an overview of what financial aid is, what those different types of financial aid look like, and how we apply for those different types of aid to kind of catch us up to where we are in the process now of looking at those financial aid offers from all of those schools that are on your list and making a really informed decision about what that financial impact for your family looks like. So we're going to get to go over kind of a sample offer that you would be able to see if you were admitted to SLU, and we have your financial information to kind of go over in detail, like I said, some of those questions that you might have on your mind at this point. And it could be helpful if you already have that financial aid offer to have that up as we're going through that sample offer, just to make sure that you're getting your questions answered about your specific offer as we're going through as well. So when we talk about financial aid, there's lots of things out there that kind of tout themselves as financial aid. And when you're looking at this financial aid offer, it can be kind of overwhelming to think about what those different types of financial aid look like and what that information is telling you. So really all types of financial aid can boil down into two overarching groups. You have your gift aid that's made up of scholarships and grants. That's free money, essentially. You don't have to pay that back. And likely that's been given to you if it's in the form of scholarships to reward yourself or your student for their achievements that they've been able to gain over their high school career. So those are scholarships in the form of like merit-based scholarships from their application for admission. Maybe they're extracurricular-based scholarships based on some talent that they have, or they're wanting to continue on with their sport, and so they're getting some athletic aid. Those kind of all fall in the scholarship category. Now, when we're talking about grants, that's typically when we're talking about the need-based aid. So these grants can be from the federal government, they can be from the state, or they can be from institutions themselves. Most likely, all of those need-based sources are going to use that free application for federal student aid to determine your need-based aid eligibility for all of those grants. So that's gift aid. Then we have self-help aid, which is made up of primarily loans and employment opportunities. So loans, of course, With that comes some repayment on down the line. You're, obligated to repay that money, but it can help you upfront pay for that cost of attendance while you're going through school and kind of, distribute that remaining balance over the course of maybe, 5 or 10 years after you're out of school. We're going to kind of talk through some of those loan programs. So you have some different options based on what your family situation looks like and what might be best option for you. So we're going to kind of talk through what that student loan looks like, what the parent loan looks like, and then private or alternative student loans as well. Employment opportunities like federal work study work a little bit differently than other types of aid. Typically, scholarships, grants, loans, those are all going to get added up and come off of your balance at those institutions in one lump sum at the beginning of the semester or beginning of the year. Employment opportunities like federal work study, you actually have to go out and find a job on campus and work those hours to be paid those funds over the course of the academic year. So we typically think about this as kind of a separate pool of money that can be used for personal or discretionary expenses that come up kind of over the course of the year for your student as they're away from home for the first time and kind of having to cover some expenses on their own for the first time as well. And we'll talk through kind of how that looks on the financial aid offers so that you can kind of anticipate that and plan what that looks like for your family as well. When we're talking about these different types of financial aid, typically when we're talking scholarships, those come in the, you apply for those based on the application for admission to those different institutions. So based on GPA or ACT or SAT scores, if you submitted those as part of your application for admission, you were awarded a merit scholarship from SLU, and that could be similar to other institutions that are also on your list at this point too. You could have gotten some merit scholarships from those institutions. Maybe there was an additional kind of competitive scholarship application that you also submitted, but by and large, that application for admission was your application for those institution scholarships. And as I mentioned, when it comes to need-based aid, that's where that free application for federal student aid comes in. So that FAFSA is going to give the institutions and the federal government and the states the expected family contribution, which essentially is a number that is calculated based on the parent income and student income that goes on that FAFSA form to determine how much your family can contribute towards your student's education for that academic year. Now, we know that it's not a perfect science, so it's not always extremely indicative of how much expendable income you have to pay to your child's education. We know that, but that's kind of our standardized way that we are able to assess need-based aid eligibility, like I said, at all of those different funding sources, federal, state, and institutional. Once you file the FAFSA, that expected family contribution for that academic year is going to remain constant against all of those schools that you're applying to. Some schools might also ask you to fill out the CSS profile to assess you for need-based aid as well. SLU doesn't accept the CSS profile. It's just that FAFSA that will determine your need-based aid eligibility, but the CSS profile is a legitimate application and does involve a little bit of a fee to be able to file that form. Private scholarships can also be a great way to kind of drive down that cost of attendance, really anywhere you're looking at attending. And really the name of the game with private scholarships is that you start as local as possible. So these can be, starting with your high school counselor saying, are there any school scholarships that might be available for, seniors going on to 2-year institutions or 4-year institutions? What local organizations are advertising scholarships to your high school counselor? So your high school counselor, your college and career counselor can be a great way to start that private scholarship journey and application process. Really, private scholarships or outside scholarships, all that means is that they're coming from an outside funding source other than an institution. So that can be really anywhere and everywhere. Rooting out those private scholarship opportunities can be really helpful kind of at this point in the process. A lot of these are going to be kind of smaller, $500, maybe $1,000 scholarships. Maybe they're just for your freshman year. But even though it seems small in kind of the grand scheme of things, when you're staring down large balances or large costs of attendance, that $500 or $1,000 can really make a difference when you're looking at that first tuition payment. This is a great place to start when you're looking for these private scholarships. Really, these FastWebs, the college boards, they're kind of national search engines for these private or outside scholarship searches. So for local students, really recommend going to My Scholarship Central, Missouri Scholarship and Loan Foundation. Your area, if you're from outside the St. Louis area, might have similar scholarship resources that just kind of compile a bunch of private and outside scholarships for in your area. So definitely, as I mentioned, consult your high school counselor, consult your admission counselor. They can kind of give places to look as well. So as we get into talking about the financial aid offers, as I mentioned, we'll be able to see a sample offer tonight that we'll kind of go over in detail. And so from all of these different institutions that you've been admitted to, that you've submitted your FAFSA to, you're likely getting these financial aid offers. And there's very differing philosophy among schools of what these financial aid offers look like, what information they're pushing out to families on these financial aid offers, and how it's all laid out and communicated to families. And so it's going to be important as you're trying to compare those offers to have a really keen eye and look out for, okay, what types of aid are they showing me? This is gift aid. So these are scholarships and grants. Okay, I don't have to repay these. Or they're showing me a lot of loans, and that means I'm going to have to repay those in the future. So really kind of, like I said, looking at those with a keen and discerning eye and making sure that you're aware of what exactly they're showing you, where the funding is coming from, so that you can really compare apples to apples when you're looking at those different financial aid offers from different schools. So at St. Louis University, you are going to receive your financial aid offer from us via email. It will go to the personal email that's on file for the student that they filed with their application for admission. It will also go to their SLU.edu email. And then if you have a FAFSA on file, it will also go to that parent email that's listed on the FAFSA filed. So it'll go all three of those places, those email addresses, as well as if your student has opted into text messaging, they'll get a text with a link that they can view their offer on their phone as well. So all of those places, they'll get an email or a text message with a link to view their personal financial aid offer without having to log in or provide any credentials or anything like that. And this is what you'll be able to see in that browser. So as you click on that link, it'll open in your browser of choice, and you'll be able to see right at the very top, 23-24 financial aid offer. Right off the bat, you'll see your student's first and last name up there, and then it'll also tell them how much they've been deemed eligible for in gift aid. So essentially, you'll be able to see the full breakdown of where all this gift aid is coming from, if it's from an institutional or state or federal source. But we just take that total and bring it up to the top of the offer to show you this is your total gift aid that you're receiving for St. Louis University for this academic year. It'll also at the top of your offer have your students' personalized admission counselor information. So as Richard mentioned at the beginning, your student's admission counselor is also their financial aid counselor through their college search. And so they can be a really great resource for students as you're kind of trying to sift through this offer and make sense of these numbers. They can sit down with you one-on-one and go over this offer line by line and answer questions about what the finances look like for not only this year, but for 4 years, and help your family kind of make an informed decision about the financial aspect of things. Right off the bat, after you scroll down, after the offer opens, you'll be able to see our estimated costs of attendance. Now, these costs you'll see are broken out into direct costs and indirect costs. And as you'll see here in the little parentheses, direct costs indicate what's actually going to be billed through the university. So things like tuition, mandatory fees for your student, the housing and meals if they're planning on living on campus, all of those things will add up to create that direct cost. That's what's going to be owed to the university, what's going to be owed to the student account. The indirect costs also are on there as part of our total cost of attendance, but these are estimates that we give all students as kind of placeholders for giving families an idea of typically what books and supplies might cost for a student, or what personal expenses, how much they're spending on personal expenses over the course of the year. And these numbers are generated based on survey data of our current students and market research for college students as well. So we have these estimates built in so that you can accept aid. So you can have scholarships, grants, and accept loans up to this full cost of attendance for your student. So you can use those loan funds to, get a refund and pay for things like books and supplies or personal expenses or other education costs for your students as well. This is going to be important, this kind of distinction between direct cost and cost of attendance as we kind of move throughout the offer. And you'll see that a little bit later on when it's actually starting to make calculations for you. But just keep in mind, direct cost equals billed cost. That's what's going to be owed to the university minus any financial aid. Indirect costs, those are estimates. Those are not owed to the university, but just kind of good to have in mind and are good numbers to kind of budget for as you're thinking about total cost to send your student off to school. After you see the full cost of attendance broken out into direct and indirect costs, will show the students' individualized grants and scholarships or gift aid that they've been awarded. So there's 4 sections in this gift aid that could indicate funding sources where your student is receiving money. So the first is institutional aid. And as you can see, Billy Billiken has some institutional aid coming from SLU. He has the SLU University Tuition Scholarship that he got from his application for admission. And then he also qualified for some grant assistance. This grant assistance is a SLU grant that's a need-based grant. And this institutional aid would automatically roll from year to year as long as you maintain a 2.0 cumulative GPA year over year. So you can see it's total gift aid there. Now, if you had state aid, for instance, you would see a state aid category with something like the Missouri Access Grant or the Missouri Bright Flight Grant, if you qualify for either of those. You could also see a federal aid category if you qualify for the federal Pell Grant or the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Also, if you have a private or outside scholarship, we're happy to put that on the offer as kind of estimated financial aid so that you can see it against your remaining balance at SLU. All you need to do there is reach out to your admission counselor or student financial services, say, I received this scholarship from XYZ organization for $1,000, and we can add it on your financial aid offer as an estimated resource, and that would show up in a private scholarship category. So you would be able to see those against that remaining balance on your financial aid offer with all of the other aid that you qualified for as well. If you're interested in exploring some of those private or outside scholarship opportunities that I shared a little bit earlier, you want to kind of go after some of those private dollars, is an Explore Now button in your financial aid offer right underneath the gift aid section, where you can go explore that section of our website and see what scholarships you might be eligible for there. And now these 2 gray banners show you your estimated net direct cost after gift aid. So that's showing you, remember, direct cost equals billed costs. So your billed costs after your free aid. And then it's also showing you cost of attendance after gift aid. So if you are really, confident in being able to pay for things like books and supplies, personal expenses, things like that for your student without using financial aid, then you're going to really be focused on this direct cost after gift aid. That's what's going to be owed to the institution. If you really feel like you need some financial aid to be able to cover expenses like books and supplies or personal expenses or transportation expenses for your student, you're going to be more focused on the cost of attendance after gift aid number. So as we kind of go through the offer, you'll see how that calculation is shown to you as well. Now, just by filing the FAFSA, your student would be eligible for a certain level of eligibility of federal direct student loans. So again, just by filing the FAFSA, regardless of what that expected family contribution is, your student, if they're a freshman by credit hours, which is less than 30 credit hours, they're going to get $5,500 in a federal direct student loan. Based on need at your at the institution, so SLU or other institution, your student could be eligible for a portion of their direct loan to be subsidized. So we can see here, Billy Billiken qualified for $3,500 of his $5,500 to be subsidized. The subsidy here is that it's not accruing interest while the student is in school. So that $3,500 not accruing interest, the unsubsidized portion, the $2,000 would be accruing interest, but for the total $5,500 for the year, that would not be, there would be no repayment obligation until 6 months after your student graduates, and repayment would go into effect at that point. So, like I said, federal direct student loans, repayment is deferred until after they're out of school, but the subsidized and unsubsidized just kind of impacts how the interest is accruing on those different portions. Now, as a family, you could decide, okay, we only want to take the subsidized portion, so we're going to accept the $3,500. We're going to decline the other $2,000, and we're just going to use that $3,500 for freshman year. Eligibility does go up a little bit based on credit hours. So if you're a sophomore by credit hours, you get $6,500 in that federal direct student loan, and then juniors and seniors by credit hours get $7,500 for their junior and senior years each, based on credit hours again. After we show you cost, it's going to subtract gift aid and then subtract loans. You'll be able to see your annual remaining cost. Again, the direct cost figure, so billed costs minus gift aid minus loans, that's the first remaining cost here. And then it'll also show you full cost of attendance minus that gift aid minus those loans and what that looks like. As you'll see, we add federal work study and kind of an additional funding options category down below that shows families, if you qualify for federal work study, how much your student would be eligible to earn over the course of the year. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we really find it most helpful to think about this as kind of, you can earn this income to help with personal expenses over the course of the year, but not really count on that $4,000 to go directly towards the balance. It can go towards direct costs, but your student is going to be paid those funds bi-weekly, like a normal paycheck. They're going to get direct deposited into whatever bank account they set up with the university. And then they would have to go make a payment back to the university if they wanted to pay on their student account. There's also a little disclaimer here that says there are going to be additional fees that might be added to your bill as you finalize enrollment. Those are things like course fees, program fees, things that have to do with your actual registration in courses. And so these course fees could be anywhere from, maybe 25 to 85 on average per class that you would be enrolled in. And these would differ based on semester, based on that actual course load that you have registered for each semester. One thing that is going to be a given for all full-time students is health insurance. So we require all of our full-time students to be covered under health insurance. You don't have to take SLU health insurance if you're covered elsewhere, but you would have to formally go in and waive that university coverage and show proof of outside coverage to have that fall off. So you could see that charge come first bill in July. But don't worry, there's still plenty of time to waive that health insurance and have that charge come off of what's owed to the institution. At the bottom of the offer, it's also going to show a series of next steps having to do with confirming or finalizing their enrollment at SLU. So if you're, looking at this remaining balance and you're kind of wondering, okay, how are we going to pay this, or what are our financing options? This first button, this Explore Options button, will take you to our financial aid website, where we have kind of a financial aid checklist, a financing example where you can kind of walk through ways to cover that remaining balance, and then also link out to other points in our site that have resources that help as you're kind of trying to think through what that financing looks like. Of course, we would love to have you on campus for an admitted student event, and so you can learn about all of those opportunities to visit us on campus through that link. There is a process called verification that requires students to submit some additional documentation and verification documents to the institution. So the federal government flags about a third of FAFSAs filed every year to go through this process of verification. And so if you are selected for verification, you can click that Complete Now button in your financial aid offer. You'll register your account with our verification portal, and then all of that documentation can be submitted online through that portal. If you have additional questions or concerns about that, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to your admission counselor or us in Student Financial Services, and we're happy to kind of walk through what documentation is needed to be able to verify that FAFSA information. Now, I mentioned this as we were talking about SLU aid, but just wanted to reiterate. So when you get your financial aid offer, it's very common for families to say, okay, this is for this year. What happens sophomore, junior, senior year? So as I mentioned, any SLU aid, so that's tuition scholarships, that's grant assistance or SLU grants, that's other maybe specialized scholarships that students have received. All of that SLU aid requires a 2.0 cumulative GPA to roll from year to year. So how this works is we check at the end of each year to see who is maintaining that 2.0 cumulative GPA. If students are falling below that 2.0, they'll get a probation where they get to keep that scholarship for the following year, but be on probation. And then if they fall underneath that 2.0 for 2 years consecutively, at that point, we would remove the scholarship. However, students can appeal to keep their scholarship for that third year. So essentially, we're guaranteeing the scholarship and aid for at least 3 years. If they're falling below that 2.0 cumulative GPA for 3 years consecutively, there's likely some other, academic implications that could be happening. And so want to make sure that we're putting those fail safes in place to make sure that students aren't falling through the cracks, and, financial stressors aren't the reason that they're not able to persist at SLU, but also making sure that they have access to resources in academic advising or a student health and counseling center so that your students can be successful here at SLU. So once you have that remaining balance, really there are, kind of 3 ways to be able to cover that remaining balance at the institution. And that really looks like first option, out of pocket. So you definitely don't have to pay in a lump sum at the beginning of the semester, but you could put it on a payment plan. So these payment plans at SLU would cut your remaining balance for this semester into 5 payments. So you'd pay monthly August to December for fall, and then January to May for spring. You would have to enroll in that payment plan each semester because we do billing by semester. So you'd have to re-enroll for every fall and every spring. You could also use college savings plans, 529 plans, to be able to help pay some of this out-of-pocket cost. If you're looking at financing any portion of the remaining balance at SLU, we highly recommend that federal student loan first. That's the lowest interest rate for student loans typically that students would be able to find. And because it's not credit qualifying, you just have to fill out the FAFSA to be able to get that loan. It's typically the lowest barrier to entry for loans as well. If you need some additional financing options, it's that Parent Plus loan or private or alternative student loans. Parent Plus loans would, of course, be in the parent's name. And the interest rate for 22-23 was 7.54%. There is a federal origination fee that would come out of that net amount that's actually sent to the school, and used to pay the balance there. But estimated monthly payment for $10,000 borrowed is about $118 a month over a standard 10-year repayment term. For private or alternative student loans, these would be going through private lenders like a credit union or a student loan lender like Discover or Sallie Mae. And these are credit qualifying. They typically would be in the student's name, but since a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds don't have a lot of credit built up, likely parents would be listed as the cosigner on these loans. And we estimate about a 10% interest rate for these private and alternative student loans. As a general rule for these private or alternative student loans, you also want to just make sure that you're reading the terms and conditions really well. You're understanding what that interest rate is, if it's fixed or if it's variable, and what that repayment is going to look like on down the line as well. It's important to us that you are made aware of all of your options, but also that you borrow really wisely. And so we don't put a Parent Plus loan or a private or alternative student loan on your financial aid offer, because we think it's really important to be able to see what that remaining balance looks like without those additional loan options that families might not be able to qualify for because they are credit qualifying. I think I'm gonna stop here and see what questions we can answer. Hopefully, as I mentioned, we kind of anticipated some questions that are currently on your mind, but I'm happy to address any questions that came in that we think might be helpful for the group.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. Really, really informative presentation. And just to address really quickly some more logistics, this will be recorded. Once again, I know we're a little bit late. And so this will be recorded, put on our YouTube channel within the next week. And please, I see it's already happening, but if you have any questions during this, I have some general questions that we get all the time that I'm going to be asking Hannah, but please feel free to continue using the Q&A function that we do have. So Hannah, start out with one that I know that I get all the time. Can you explain how EFC is calculated and if it'll be the same each year? And if so, how does their grant assistance affected by that in subsequent years?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So the expected family contribution is calculated on the FAFSA by using a collection of, it'll ask for parent income and asset information and student income and asset information. It goes off of the base year, which is typically 2 years prior to when you're actually filing the FAFSA. So for the 23-24 FAFSA, you were reporting 2021 tax and income information, but asset information as of the day that you were filing the FAFSA. So it'll compile that income and asset information for both the student and the parent and give you that expected family contribution. Because the FAFSA each year goes based off of certain tax year income, it could change from year to year as you flow through your student experience. And so you could see changes or fluctuations in that expected family contribution as you kind of move through. If there was a big change in income for either the parent or the student, or there's a different amount of assets that's reported on the FAFSA from year to year, you could see that expected family contribution change. At SLU, your grant assistance is locked in based on that first year expected family contribution. So we don't automatically adjust grant assistance or SLU grant for fluctuations in EFC from year to year. Meaning if your EFC goes up because mom got a raise, we are not going to take any money away from the student for subsequent years. So that aid will just kind of automatically roll from year to year as your student is going through their time at SLU. Things like federal aid and state aid could be impacted by fluctuations in that EFC. So for instance, if you're eligible for a federal Pell Grant, that is dependent upon your EFC every year. And there's a chart that maps out like to the hundreds what you might be eligible for based on that expected family contribution. So you could expect fluctuations in that federal Pell Grant as you kind of go through your time if there are changes to that expected family contribution.
Great, thank you. And so this is sort of tying in exactly what you're saying. And I'm sure this is a question some of the students have right now, but there is a bunch of different type of grants that can show up, right? There's the Pell Grant, there's a possibility Missouri State Grant, and then there's a SLU grant. Could you explain the difference between those three, and then really quickly how those are determined?
Yeah, so essentially the differences between the big difference is the funding source. So like federal Pell Grant is going to come from the federal government. State grants, the Missouri Access grants, those are going to come from the state of Missouri. And then the SLU grant, or the grant assistance, as it might show up on your financial aid offer now, are from St. Louis University. So they also have very different thresholds for what might make you eligible for aid at those different funding sources. So for instance, your EFC has to be less than approximately 7,000 to be able to qualify for federal Pell Grant. But to qualify for a state grant, it only has to be less than 12,000. And you could qualify for a need-based grant from SLU if your EFC is much, much higher than that. So there are different thresholds at all of those different funding sources that would determine your eligibility for that need-based aid.
Great. And it seems like we're getting a lot of international financial aid questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask just a couple here in a row about those. A lot of students are asking, what is that process? How does the process differ from an international student applying for aid here in the US, or specifically at SLU, compared to a domestic student?
Yeah, so for international students, you would automatically be considered for those merit scholarships just like domestic students would. And so with your admission decision to SLU, you likely got notification of what that merit scholarship looked like. Now for international students, you wouldn't be eligible to file the FAFSA. Only students that are US citizens or eligible non-citizens would be able to file that FAFSA and be qualified for need-based aid at SLU or through the federal government. But there are other avenues for additional scholarship dollars for international students here at SLU as well. So there are different options like our International Gateway that you can certainly reach out to your admission counselor for more information to see if you might be eligible for those additional aid opportunities as well.
Great. And then just one more question about financial aid. And I know this is getting a little bit into the weeds here. But for on-campus employment for international students, is that still a possibility for them?
Yes. So international students are able to work on campus if you would like to. You wouldn't be eligible for federal work study, but there are institutional jobs that you could still apply for and work on campus. And we have a platform called Handshake on campus that would allow students to go in and see what federal work study and institutional jobs we have available for students on campus and apply for those. Typically for incoming students, we say to wait until about June or July to look for those opportunities for that coming academic year, but also just keep checking that platform as well to see what opportunities might be available to work on campus.
Great. And so some students might be seeing already with their FAFSA that they're being selected for a process called verification. Mm-hmm. What steps should they take if they've received notification that they need to go through verification?
Yeah, so we have an online verification portal that hopefully makes it pretty easy and clear on what documentation is needed. And so that link can be found in your financial aid offer. In those next steps, you'll hit that complete now button in the verification next step. And it'll take you to a register account page for our verification portal where you put in your first name, your last name, your date of birth, and your social security number, exactly how it's reported on your FAFSA form. That allows our verification portal to link your FAFSA information with your account. And so you're able to go in there and see a dashboard of all of the forms that we need to be able to verify your FAFSA information. Typically, if you're selected for like standard verification, we would need a verification worksheet that essentially lays out how many are in your household and kind of just verifies the tax filing status of the parent and the student as you reported on the FAFSA. And then we might ask for some additional information like providing a copy of your parents' tax return, their W-2s from 2021, or the student tax or income information so that we can just run that verification and make sure that all of those numbers reported on your FAFSA are accurate.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And so I don't think it's been mentioned yet tonight, but SLU does have something called a special circumstance review process that takes a little bit more of a detailed look at a family's financial situation when the FAFSA might not tell that entire story. Could you walk us through what that process is like for those students and how would they start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the special circumstance process is really for families who, as of the time that they're filling out the FAFSA, something has changed drastically that is not really captured in that FAFSA form. As I mentioned, because it goes 2 years back, we know that things could have changed drastically in your financial situation that's not reflective on those taxes from 2021. And so these would be things like there's been a loss of job or a substantial loss of income in your household since the base year of that 2021 tax year. It could be loss of a parent. It could be a divorce or a separation. Maybe as you filed the FAFSA, your parents were still married or still living together, but now you need to say, there's been a change in my household. We can also do special circumstance appeals for families who have younger dependent children that are in private school. So we could potentially do adjustments to the adjusted gross income for those families for the tuition paid for younger dependents. And there's a series of other circumstances that we might be able to review for. Essentially, it's a Google form out on our website. It kind of lays out all of those different circumstances that we are able to review for. You can fill out that Google form, giving us a little bit more information about how your circumstances have changed. And we'll be able to go through that review process. Typically, we do an initial review where we see, based on the information that you put in the appeal, if it might generate any additional aid or any change to that expected family contribution. And we'll reach out and ask for any additional supporting documentation or verification that we might need to be able to move forward with that full review.
Great. And so SLU just started something this year, and this is more for the folks watching. It's called the Billiken Promise, right? It's made up of 4 different initiatives that SLU has started and that we've committed for students this year. One of them being a guaranteed semester abroad at our SLU Madrid campus. So we've gotten a couple questions in the chat about this. How does their financial aid offer transfer over with them to SLU Madrid? And is there any additional aid they may be able to receive to help study abroad?
Yeah, so that guaranteed study abroad at our SLU Madrid as part of the Billiken Promise is really kind of an academic promise, making sure that it kind of fits in everybody's schedule that wants to be able to spend a semester abroad in Spain at our SLU Madrid campus. The financial aid offer, essentially, if you are going for a semester, your SLU aid that you received for the St. Louis campus would travel with you to the Madrid campus as well. So you would be able to use your aid that you have currently to be able to study abroad for a semester in SLU Madrid. The only caveat to that would be if you're going in a summer term, SLU aid cannot be applied towards summer or winter terms. And so if you're planning on doing that study abroad experience in the summer, your SLU aid would not be able to travel with you for that summer term.
Well, that is a perfect segue into my next question about summer terms. Could you explain a little bit about the Billiken Difference fund that we have set aside for students and how they may be able to utilize that?
Yes. So another kind of pillar of that Billiken Promise was the SLU Difference Award that promises $10,000 for new freshmen and $6,000 for new transfer students to be able to use in those non-standard terms. So your SLU aid is going to apply to fall and spring terms for 10 semesters. So you'll have that aid for 5 years as long as you're pursuing your undergraduate degree in fall and spring. For winter and summer, that aid would not typically apply. And so students have the option to use this kind of separate pool of money, this $10,000, as I mentioned, for freshmen, to use it towards a winter term class or a summer class for their major if they are required to take summer classes, like, maybe some of our folks in PATOT, or if they just want to take a summer course to kind of get ahead a little bit or catch up a little bit. So they are able to use that $10,000 kind of at their discretion towards winter or summer terms. And if they're not planning on using any of that towards, a winter or summer class in their undergraduate years, they could save that full $10,000 to use towards a graduate degree here at SLU as well.
Great. All right. So a quick, we still have a few more minutes since we started late. We're going to go just a few more minutes longer. Are there any scholarships that current students can still apply for beyond the financial aid offer they've received?
So really at this point in the semester, we have kind of reached the tail end of our scholarship awarding for certainly merit scholarships, but also for our competitive scholarships as well. Really at this point in the semester, it's seeking out those outside or private scholarships from outside sources. So we've really kind of put all of our aid on the table in scholarship dollars at this point for students. But really it would be, like I said, kind of drilling down into those outside or private scholarship lists, see what scholarships you might be eligible for. And as I mentioned before, just kind of starting as local as possible to really maximize your chances of actually getting some scholarship dollars and making sure that you're spending your time and your energy wisely by not just applying to scholarships that hundreds of thousands of college going students are going to be applying to each year.
Great. And then let's say a student does receive some private scholarships. Mm-hmm. One, how would those interact with their financial aid offer? And then two, how would they notify SLU and how would they get us that money?
Yeah, so you might hear the term stackable quite a bit in the financial aid process here at SLU or at different institutions that you're looking at as well. So at SLU, we stack your private or outside scholarships on top of any SLU aid, federal aid, state aid that you might be eligible for as well. So the only caveat to that would be if your private scholarship stipulates that it has to go towards a certain cost element. And so if it says this has to go towards tuition and you're already at full tuition with SLU aid, that's the only instance in which we would reduce our SLU aid so that your private scholarship could pay towards tuition. Now, most private or outside scholarships, I would say the majority are going to say this can go towards any education related cost. And so what that means is that if you are up to full tuition and you have a private or outside scholarship that comes in and says this can go towards any educational cost, that can go towards fees, that can go towards room and board, that can go towards any parking, any other direct cost, and it could also be refunded back to you. If you have a zero balance and you get an outside scholarship, we could just refund that money back to you to pay for things like books and supplies, any other education related costs that you might incur over the course of the year.
Great. And so I know we've mentioned this before, but the financial aid offers will be shared. Either they've already been shared or potentially in the current weeks. Do we have an estimate of when international financial aid offers will be going out? And then how will those families be receiving them?
Yes. So fingers crossed, international awards will go out this week, likely on Friday, and you will get an email to your personal email. So the email that you listed as your personal email on your application for admission, your SLU email. So if you haven't set up your slu.edu email quite yet, you'll want to do that. And then the parent email. Although for international students, you wouldn't have a FAFSA on file, so we wouldn't have your parent information. So students, it's going to be important for you to kind of keep an eye on those two inboxes and make sure that you're kind of staying up to date and can see when that email comes in.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that's all the time we have for questions. I'm going to have a couple closing session topics that I'll cover. But thank you so much, Hannah. And if anyone else has any questions, please, once again, reach out to your personalized admission counselor. As one, if we don't know the answer, Hannah is great, and she's right there to answer any questions that we may have as well. So let's go over what your next steps are going to be after reviewing your financial aid offer. One, discussing it amongst yourself, right? Any of the financial stakeholders in your family will sit down and discuss if this is something that is feasible for you. After you've exhausted all of your options, right? Filling out the special circumstance relief form, applying for outside scholarships, taking a look at private student loans. And if this is something that you think you can make work, then you would submit the enrollment deposit, right? So the enrollment deposit, you would find on how to pay for that through your My SLU portal, right? So when you were originally admitted to SLU, you received an email that had your My SLU portal name with a temporary password. If you're unable to get in there for whatever reason, just contact your admission counselor. We'll help you get logged in. But through that, that portal access, you'll have access to a payment suite, your SLU email address. So once you go into try and deposit, you'll click on payment suite, and then within payment suite, there will be a deposit button that you'll click. Now that is a $500 non-refundable deposit. That deposit goes to help pay for things like summer orientation, fall welcome. It also helps pay for, there's a couple different applications that'll open, including your housing contract, your learning community contract, your SLU 101 registration, which goes throughout the month of June and early July, but also some of your placement tests. So every student, with the exception of students who have taken specific 1818 classes through their high school, have to take an English placement test and a math placement test. Certain majors will have to take a chemistry placement test. If you don't see a chemistry placement test on there, you don't have to take it. And then if you intend on studying a foreign language while here at SLU, then we always recommend you taking the foreign language placement test as well. We'd like to see those done about 3 to 4 weeks before your SLU 101 date, just so your academic advisor has time to review that and then help come up with a curriculum that's gonna be best for you. And so those will be live as soon as you submit that $500 deposit. So give us, actually not as soon, because give us about 24 to 40 hours for that to process. And then those in your My SLU portal, you should see all of those open up. Your housing contract, your SLU 101 registration, and your placement tests. Fantastic question. Placement test, the English one cannot. English is once and done. The math placement test, you have 5 tries. It's through a program that we call Alex. And then each time that you take this test, if you're unhappy with your score, there's a certain amount of study time through the program that you take, and then you have to go on and take the test again. And each time you take the subsequent exam, the amount of studying time within Alex you have to do increases. So definitely keep that in mind when you're going to take a look at those. So I always recommend, if you want to take a look at your financial aid offer, if you want to have a more specific individualized discussion with your admission counselor, there are links being sent out weekly for both virtual in market, which means that we will go to our specific markets. For example, I have the states of Michigan and Illinois, and I've been hosting in person throughout the states of Michigan and Illinois meetings with students who want to come in person and meet with me, but also virtual appointments. And then for some of our local students, we have on-campus appointments as well. And those will be emails. So definitely keep an eye on those. You also should have received an email called Becoming a Billiken Checklist. This is absolutely important because this will help follow you, and you can literally check off. I have students put it on their fridge so they can keep in mind everything that you have to do to move forward and to make sure that you have a successful fall once you move in here. And then obviously, if you haven't been on campus yet and you're able to make it, we have a lot of opportunities coming up. We have a couple admitted student days coming up into the next month. We also have daily visits Monday through Saturday that you're able to do. So make sure that if you haven't seen campus and you would love to, we would love to have you, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we can arrange something for you as well. So please, like I said, we're here for you. We want to help your admission counselors. So any questions you have, whether it's about financial stuff or if it's about academic stuff, please let us know. We're here to help support you as you either choose SLU or choose to attend and continue your education somewhere else. So once again, I would like to thank everyone for coming and thank you for your patience as we had some technical difficulties there at the beginning. Once again, this recording will be on YouTube in the next couple of weeks. So if you had some network stabilization issues or you joined a little late, this will be up within the coming week on our YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out in case you have any questions that you didn't have asked tonight. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and I hope everyone has a fantastic evening. Bye.